I wanted to take a moment to observe some of the findings of a Florida grand jury that had been convened on this subject. And what the grand jury found was that children are often treated to the most perilous of journeys as a consequence of policy decisions that allowed them to be released into the interior of the country. And so what this Florida grand jury did was they reviewed thousands of documents from our Department of Children and Families, from our Health and Human Services agencies, from our safety net organizations, and they issued a scathing report asking essentially the Congress to choose a different path than that has been chosen by the Biden administration. And so I want to take a moment to reflect on some of those findings in the record. Quote, "Our findings are clear. If any Florida resident exposed U.S.-born children to this process, they would justifiably be arrested for child neglect or worse. We do not think children should be less protected simply because they were born outside our borders and brought here by a government agency. Those here in Florida who are sending money and other aid to facilitate this process should know what they are funding. At nearly every juncture, travelers forging the Darien Gap and other notorious routes must pay handlers, armed militia groups, native tribes, local warlords, gangs, or drug cartels in order to obtain safe passage. In many cases, the toll is exacted in lives, labor, or sexual abuse. They face disease, famine, drought, a perilous jungle trek, insects, and predators, both human and animal. One child disclosed that during her journey, several of her group were robbed and attacked by rival gang members, decapitated, and raped. The child disclosed that she was one of the victims of that rape. Grand juries are not political entities. They are sourced from regular folks who review evidence, and perhaps this body, ever so partisan in addressing the issue, would glean some clarity from what we are hearing. The critique of our government from the grand jury was this: armed with a budget of billions of taxpayer dollars and working with activists and nonprofit organizations, which receive hundreds of millions of dollars in grant monies, hold millions in assets, and pay cadres of executive salaries in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, is handling thousands of foreign children in a dangerous manner. This is a nonpartisan analysis from a grand jury in my state, deeply concerned about the way these decisions that the Biden administration is making is affecting these children. And, Mr. Chairman, I seek that all of the findings and presentments of the Florida grand jury on unaccompanied children be entered into the record.
Without objection.
I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I yield to the gentleman from Texas.
And I thank the gentleman from Florida, and I think for making those points. And look, and I'll say to the gentlelady from El Paso that I take her words to heart, and I'd be happy to have conversations about what we can do going forward. I think where we disagree, as you laid out, is I have come to the conclusion observationally, having worked on this issue as a staffer for John Cornyn, a staffer for Ted Cruz, as someone who was working for Governor Perry at the time this was being debated, then now having seen it now, up close and personally, and I was working as a lawyer on the Senate Judiciary Committee, there are multiple of those debates, is that we have to do this sequentially, in my view. Now, you might disagree, but I'm just giving you sort of an idea of how you, in my view, how you do this. In my opinion, you have to establish that you're going to enforce the rule of law. And the example of your predecessor, Sylvester Reyes, right, was a part of building infrastructure and fencing in El Paso. And I'm directing my remarks, I guess, inappropriately not to the chair, but through the chair, I would argue that the predecessor of the gentlelady from El Paso worked on building the fence there.
Would you yield 10 seconds?
I will yield, yes, ma'am.
No, he
To the
can't.
chair.
No, it's not my time.
It's my time.
All right, I yield back to the gentleman from Florida.
I have a series of additional unanimous consent requests, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen.
From the New York Times, April 17, 2020. I'm sorry. From the New York Times, as migrant children were put to work, U.S. ignored warnings.
Without objection.
New York Times, February 25th, 2023. Alone and exploited migrant children work brutal jobs across the United States.
Without objection.
New York Post, March 22nd, 2021. Mexican drug cartels use kids as decoys to smuggle in members.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman.
Back.